The sun hung low over the vast plains, casting long shadows over the dusty town of Red Rock. The wind carried whispers of struggle and desperation, rustling through the dry grass and the crooked fences of abandoned farms. In a small, crumbling cabin at the edge of town, a widow named Mary clutched her two children close, their eyes hollow with hunger and fear. Her husband had fallen to a fever the previous winter, leaving her alone to fend for her little ones. With each passing day, the rations dwindled, the nights grew colder, and hope became a distant memory. Mary had worked tirelessly, scrubbing floors and washing laundry in the homes of the wealthy ranchers, but the money never lasted long, and there was no one in Red Rock willing to lend a hand. Her heart ached as she watched her children's ribs show through their thin clothing, their laughter replaced by silent tears. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind the distant hills, Mary made a decision that tore at her soul. She would do the unthinkable. She would offer her children to someone who could give them a chance at life, even if it meant she would have to sacrifice herself. Clutching the small bundle of belongings she could carry, she trudged toward the main street, where the town's occasional travelers and ranchers came and went. Her eyes scanned the dusty road, looking for someone strong, someone kind, someone who might take them in. That's when she saw him, a lone cowboy, tall and rugged, his hat pulled low over his eyes, his horse pawing at the ground impatiently. There was an aura of calm authority about him, a quiet strength that made Mary's heart leap with a glimmer of hope. Mustering all her courage, she approached him, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Please, take my children, feed them, care for them. I can't do it anymore." The cowboy looked down at her, his eyes sharp but kind, taking in the desperation etched into her features, the weariness that weighed her shoulders down. For a long moment he said nothing. The wind swirled around them, carrying the distant sounds of the town's restless night. Finally, he spoke, his voice deep and steady. "I'll take you too." Mary blinked, unable to comprehend his words. "Me, but I can't pay you. I have nothing to offer." He shook his head, a small, wry smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "It's not about money. It's about doing what's right. Come with me." That night, Mary made a choice she never imagined she would. She handed her children over to the cowboy's care, and together they rode out of Red Rock, leaving behind the ghosts of her past and the hunger that had haunted them for so long. The journey was harsh, the nights cold, and the days filled with uncertainty. But the cowboy, whose name Mary would later learn was Luke, kept them safe. He hunted for food, tended to the children's wounds, and shared stories around the campfire that made them laugh again. Mary, though weary, felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years: trust, hope, and the fragile warmth of family reborn. Along the way, Luke spoke little of his past, yet his actions spoke volumes. He knew hardship, he knew loneliness, and he understood the weight of responsibility. Mary watched him. He silently fixed the wagon wheel, guided the horses through treacherous terrain, and defended them from bandits and wild animals. With each passing day, she realized that the man who had offered to take them in wasn't just a protector. He was a man with a heart as vast as the plains themselves, and yet she carried a secret fear in her heart. Could she ever belong in this rugged, untamed world? Could she prove herself worthy of the life Luke offered? As the days turned into weeks, Mary began to learn the rhythms of the land. She learned to ride, to tend the small crops they planted, to care for the children with a strength she never knew she possessed. Luke watched her, impressed by her determination and courage. Slowly, walls of mistrust and fear began to crumble, replaced by mutual respect and something more tender, more profound. One evening, as the sun painted the horizon in shades of gold and crimson, Luke spoke for the first time about his past. He had been a rancher once, with a family he loved dearly, but misfortune had stolen them from him. He wandered the plains ever since, never settling, until he saw Mary and her children. "I've been looking for a reason to stay," he said quietly. "I think I found it." Mary's heart swelled, a mixture of relief, fear, and a growing affection that surprised her. She realized that the cowboy who had offered to take her in had given her more than protection. He had given her a chance at life, a chance at love, and a future for her children she had never dared to imagine. And as the night fell over the open plains, with the children sleeping peacefully by the campfire, Mary made a silent promise to herself, to Luke, and to the life they were building together. She would fight, she would endure, and she would love with every ounce of her being. For the first time in years, she felt alive. If you're captivated by Mary and Luke's journey, and want to see what happens next as their lives intertwine, with danger, hope, and unexpected romance. The morning sun rose slowly over the dusty plains, casting long golden rays across the makeshift camp the cowboy had set up. The widow, still trembling from the events of the previous night, watched silently as he moved with practiced ease, preparing breakfast over the small fire. Her children, clutching at her skirts, peeked curiously at the stranger who had, against all odds, offered them safety. The cowboy, whose name she had only just learned was Luke, smiled briefly at the kids, his eyes softening with an unusual warmth. It was a rare side to him, one that seemed almost at odds with the hardened exterior of a man who had ridden through countless storms alone. As the smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, the widow felt a cautious sense of relief settle over her heart. For the first time in months, she dared to believe that there might be a chance for her family to survive this harsh world. Luke handed the children small plates, his movements deliberate and calm, showing them a kindness they had never known. The youngest, a little girl with wide brown eyes, reached out shyly to touch his rough hand. He caught her wrist gently, letting her know he meant no harm, and the corners of his mouth twitched into a rare, comforting grin. The widow watched from a distance, feeling an unfamiliar stir of something she hadn't expected. Hope. She knew this man carried secrets, a past buried deep behind the rugged exterior. But in that moment, she chose not to think about the dangers. She allowed herself to trust, at least for a moment. After breakfast, Luke packed up the camp, and the widow followed with her children, their small belongings bundled in a tattered sack. They rode through endless plains, the wind whipping through their hair, the children clinging tightly to their mother, and yet not once did fear fully overcome them. Luke rode silently beside them, scanning the horizon, as though expecting trouble at every turn. And trouble, as it often did in their unforgiving world, soon found them. A gang of outlaws, notorious for raiding settlements and preying on the vulnerable, appeared on a distant ridge. Luke's hand instinctively went to the revolver at his hip, and he motioned for the widow to keep her children low. The outlaws, seeing him alone with a family, laughed cruelly, certain of an easy victory. But Luke was no ordinary cowboy. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, betrayed a lifetime of survival and a code that would not allow harm to reach those under his protection. With calculated precision, he faced the men, his revolver flashing in the morning sun, forcing them to hesitate. The standoff was tense, every second stretching into an eternity, until Luke's commanding voice rang out, warning them off. The outlaws, unnerved by his resolve and the unmistakable skill in his stance, slowly backed away, muttering threats, but ultimately retreating into the horizon. The widow's hands trembled, clutching her children tightly, tears of relief streaming down her face. She realized in that moment that she had stumbled upon something extraordinary, a protector who would stop at nothing to ensure their safety. Days turned into weeks as they journeyed together. Luke shared little of his past, only fragments glimpsed in quiet conversations by the campfire. The widow, whose name was Sarah, began to see him not just as a savior but as a man, shaped by hardship and yet capable of profound kindness. She found herself leaning on his strength in ways she hadn't imagined possible. And slowly, walls she had built around her heart began to crumble. Her children, once wary and withdrawn, laughed again, their innocence gradually returning under Luke's watchful eyes. Yet even in this fragile peace, the shadows of the past lingered. Bandits, harsh weather, and the unforgiving frontier tested them at every turn, and each challenge strengthened the bond that was forming between them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and orange, Luke and Sarah sat near the fire, watching the children play nearby. A quiet understanding passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of the growing affection that neither dared name aloud. "You've done more for us than I could have imagined," Sarah said softly, her voice tinged with gratitude and something deeper. Luke, usually reserved and guarded, simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the flames, as if searching for the right words that never came. There was a vulnerability in his silence, a rare glimpse of the man beneath the cowboy facade, and Sarah felt her heart responding kind. The journey continued, each day blending struggle and small triumphs, laughter and fear, but slowly, they began to build a life together on the edges of the untamed land. Luke taught Sarah how to defend herself, how to survive in the wild, and in return, she shared warmth, compassion, and a softness that Luke had long forgotten existed. The children, now accustomed to their protector, called him Uncle Luke, a title he accepted with quiet pride. But life on the frontier was never simple, and threats lurked at every turn. One fateful day, while foraging near a river, they were ambushed by a rival gang seeking revenge on Luke for a past altercation. Outnumbered, cornered, and with the children hidden nearby, Luke fought with a ferocity fueled by love and determination. The skirmish was brutal, every moment teetering on the edge of tragedy, but Luke's experience and cunning allowed them to escape, though not without injuries that left him weakened. Sarah, tending to his wounds, realized fully the depth of her feelings. She could no longer deny the bond that had grown from desperation and survival into something deeper, something enduring.